If you've ever cracked open a self-help book in your life, you've probably at some point been presented with the notion that many or even most of your problems came from the way you were brought up. This narrative is so deeply ingrained in our current self-help culture that nowadays, sometimes we're tempted to believe that every single bad thing that has ever happened in our life is ultimately the fault of the people who raised us. While it is undeniable that parents and guardians have a massive impact on the development of their children, I'm starting to wonder if maybe we aren't giving our parents just a little bit too hard of a time. The age of popular self-help has certainly been a bit of an uncomfortable experience for a lot of the people who have raised us, as their parenting styles and decisions, whether conscious or unconscious, increasingly come under fire. Remember though that our parents had to make decisions then that today are judged through the lens of a decade's worth of new understanding that they just didn't have. All in all, it's kind of a sucky time to have been a parent 10 years ago. I'm not downplaying the massive effect that our parents have on us, including for all the years after we leave their homes. Nor am I excusing things like abuse and neglect. Parenting is an incredibly important endeavor and needs to be taken with the utmost seriousness. When you become a parent, you need to understand that your actions will have a profound and lasting impact on your child, probably until the day they die. However, becoming a parent myself has really started to open up my eyes. Every year that goes by that I'm a parent makes me realize more and more just how hard parenting can be. When my first child was born, I remember scoffing at friends and relatives, or people in the store, watching them struggle to control their kids and thinking how much better I would do when I was a parent myself. I was pretty sure that all of my study of philosophy, psychology, and spirituality, and just general common sense would empower me to do a much better job. I was so sure that if I did everything right, and I had a pretty good idea that I would do everything right, my kids would turn out perfectly, and we would have very few problems. To be honest, so far my kids are turning out pretty well, but I'm realizing more and more how much this is to their credit rather than to mine. Sure, my wife and I have made a lot of conscious decisions about our parenting, and we are very careful about raising our kids, but when you're a parent, there are so many things that are out of your control that you just don't count on. There are so many questions that don't seem to have clear-cut answers. What's the right balance between discipline and leniency? Between creating an environment of safety and letting them learn hard lessons on their own? How much should you say yes? How much should you say no? Should you work hard to instill them with your own values or let them discover their own? If you're not a parent currently, you probably feel like you have pretty good answers to all these questions, and they probably seem like they are pretty clear-cut. That's certainly what I thought before I had children, but I promise you, a lot of the time, they're really not. I know that there's going to be a lot of you that will roll your eyes and will probably never believe me on this until you have your own kids if you choose to do so. And I am fully prepared to accept that fact because I get it. It was only a few short years ago that I was the one being told, "Oh, you'll understand when you're a parent." And I was the one rolling my eyes and being like, "Okay, boomer, but like, I read Brené Brown." Well, I did read Brené Brown, and I read a lot of other stuff too. But if you ever do become a parent, I can pretty much guarantee that you'll eventually reach a spot where you'll realize that no amount of reading and research and planning could possibly have prepared you to raise an actual child in real life. It's a joy unlike anything I've ever experienced, but also, sometimes, it's just really hard. All of this is to say that maybe we should just be a little easier on our parents. I'm sure they weren't perfect. Whoever your guardians were, I'm sure they made a lot of really dumb mistakes. You may feel like you can excuse some of these mistakes, and you may feel like some of them you can't. And I'm not here to tell you how you should feel about your particular parenting situation, because there are all kinds of parents out there, and I haven't met yours. But in my own case, I am learning to appreciate the difficult positions that my parents were in that I just never could have understood as a child. At the end of the day, mistakes are a part of parenting. Any occupation you choose to engage in involves making a lot of mistakes. The fact that parenting is an occupation where mistakes have unpredictable and far-reaching consequences does not prevent those mistakes from happening. In a word, the relative seriousness of mistakes does not overrule their inevitability. So where does this leave us, the products of those mistakes? If you feel like there are things you wish your parents had done differently, first of all, you're definitely not alone. Again, no parent is perfect, and the scars of childhood are an inevitable inheritance passed down from generation to generation. Even though these scars may not be our fault, they are now our responsibility. Since most of the people watching this video will probably be at the age where their parents are no longer in charge of them, it is now up to us to parent ourselves. What does this mean? This means that since you may be dissatisfied with some of the ways your parents raised you, you now have the opportunity to be the parent you never had. What do you wish your parents had done differently? What can you do now to fill in that gap? If you feel like your parents never taught you certain things, whether that's a work ethic or social skills or just how to keep a clean house or deal with stress, you now get to pick up where they left off or where they didn't show up. Just because you didn't learn something as a kid doesn't mean that you can't learn it now. Contrary to what a lot of people seem to believe, adults are perfectly capable of learning things they never learned in childhood. There's plenty of scientific research to back this up. If you feel like what you were missing from your parents was love, attention, or validation, this is definitely tricky to deal with, but it can be done. For these and many other problems associated with childhood trauma, there are licensed professionals available to help. These people can teach you skills that will enable you to deal with these difficulties. It's kind of out of my realm to advise on therapy, but one thing I would say as an unqualified guy with an opinion is that I would recommend looking for professionals who not only seek to validate what you're feeling, but also give you concrete tools to use, and who hold you accountable for making real progress even when it's uncomfortable. I also personally believe that integrating spirituality into your life in addition to seeking professional help can yield excellent results. Study for answers to what you're going through, not only in scientific literature, but in the wisdom of people that came before us. Now, obviously I'm going to plug Taoism here, but if you're a Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or member of any other religion, there's a lot to be gained from pretty much any of these spiritual traditions. Basically, all of this is just to say that, although it may take us an entire lifetime to sort out all the aftermath of our childhood, we can sort it out. Although some of the effects of your parents' mistakes may never go away completely, you can still grow up and strengthen and improve as a human being, and you can get better at dealing with your problems. And through all this, maybe try to cut your parents a little bit of slack. You may not see a lot of this in the current popular self-help trends, but there's a lot to be gained from walking a couple miles in your parents' shoes. You probably only have a very limited understanding of what caused them to make the mistakes they made. Remember that throughout this whole process of healing, the first step is awareness of the problem. The second step is what you do about it, but the third and finalizing step is when you choose to move on. Forgiveness is the part of the process that turns scars into skin. It's the best and final indicator of whether you've really moved on or whether you're still a prisoner to those things from your past. You can't hide behind your parents' mistakes forever. Well, you can, but it won't do you a lot of good. Your childhood trauma may not be your fault, but it is now your responsibility. This all takes time, but ultimately, if we choose to remain in our bitterness and victimhood, rather than moving on and working through our issues, then our parents are no longer the problem. We are. Thank you for watching. Peace and blessings.